Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I hope and trust that you are all well. Before I get started, I would like to give a very special shout out to the reformed members of Back to Ashes. Tina Mead, Manna Ash, Normie DW, Christy Elias, Cindy Cleveland, Patty's niece, Samantha Place, and Inner Scare Wifey. The rest of the Back to Ashes family can be seen right here on your screen. If you would like to become a member of Back to Ashes, that membership information can be found below. Perks include early release on videos in their uncensored format, uploads on the weekend, and much, much more. If you like what you're hearing, a thumbs up, a comment would be appreciated, and if you're not yet subscribed, please do so and hit that notification bell and set it to all. That way you know every time I upload. As well, the Buy Me a Coffee link is down below. With all of that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled Short, Scary Stories. Right after this intro, an ad will play. I'll read the first story, an ad will play, and after that there will be no more ads within this video. Day 1. It will start off by watching you from the shadows. It will observe the habits of your daily life. Seeing or noticing it during this first day will be rare. Make sure you are aware of your surroundings at all times. If you hear anything of the normal, follow the noise and it will vanish. Day 2. The entity will be more persistent in mentally breaking you. You will have a higher chance of seeing it lurking around the corner now. It will never harm you, even if you attempt to attack. The form of this thing is unknown since it takes on a shape and form that differs from person to person. It's unknown what these variants would be since everyone that has come in contact with this thing has died. Do not look directly at it since you risk insanity. Avoid any contact with it as much as possible. It wants to make you mad, drive you out of your normal state, and drive you crazy. Day 3. It will be right behind you at all times. Right on the edge of your field of vision, you will feel a presence near you, and the feeling that you're being watched. You are. It will feed you lies. Do not listen to it. It feeds off of your negativity and fear. It wants you to harm others and harm yourself. Nothing much can be done to appeal it aside from pushing through this final day. No matter what, do not succumb to its... Do it. Listen to it. We don't mean any harm. You should listen to us and give in. Lies are not what we tell. The truth is what we say. Listen to us. Do what we tell you. You are spreading love. It may be messy and blood may be on your hands, but it's in others' best interest. Let them join the big man in the sky. Bring peace to as many as you can. The gray days passed on, as they all did, in the decrepit house of Mr. Pernicious. He followed his ancestors, working the fields and sowing crops, and for a while he wore a tired smile, but the joy once there slowly decayed into something much more terrible. It seems to grow by day, as the tired smile slowly turned into a neutral and slowly drooping frown. But still, Mr. Pernicious worked and worked, his face showing more wrinkles as he plugged his shovel into the soft soil. But his feelings still overwhelmed him, and slowly but surely, Mr. Pernicious's estate began to worsen and decay. The wood rotted and his foundation began to crumble. The crops began to spoil. The dirt became too hard. Mr. Pernicious's face became a perpetual frown, as he struggled to even wield a shovel. His head began to bend down, his mouth drooping agape, his eyes glazed over, and one day, a thunderstorm cracked at the end of the dawn and split his rickety old house in two. And then the pale man with his drooping and somber frown fell down too, and then on his face a smile grew. Please be mindful of the future when dabbling with witchcraft in your teenage years. A lot of what you can try out is easy to undertake. Your efforts may well be successful, and you may not even suffer any immediate negative effects. Instead, the real concern is what you achieve may well endure for the rest of your life. Do you really want to live with the decisions of your teenage years until the grave? Would you be happy with your choice of forehead tattoo if you had picked one at 13 years old? My problems began thanks to my love of golf simulator computer games, or rather, the landscapes surrounding the digital, fully franchised players. Beautiful blue skies and fluffy digital clouds, crowds of people murmuring the same sound files, clubhouses and trees that had never known living beings, a perfect weekend afternoon forever. Here was a piece there that took me far away from the classroom, homework, and the stress and noise of the school bus. I wanted the calm of the imaginary golf fields to last forever. My dream was possible and required few overheads, some candles and broken glass across skin, specific marks down on the floor with chalk. Afterwards, a great squeezing from no obvious source had grasped my limbs. But it worked. I gained the ability to go back to those courses whenever I wanted, when everything got too much or the name calling began. I rode back to acres of green grass that had never known water. One oddity were the gray faces in the top windows in some of the nearby buildings, but you need not to go inside them to achieve peace. Nothing about those cold eyes affected the calm of the murmuring crowd. The problem is, everybody has changed. My job is busy but rewarding, and with decent financial gain. I spend my evenings watching the sunset from my balcony with a glass of red wine. The nearby cycle routes are great, and my bike is top of the range. So many nice restaurants exist within walking distance. Exhibitions, shows, and music gigs are all one taxi away. But they raise the same bland emotional involvement of the supermarket queue. I will be on a date in a place with great whiskey sours, talking to someone I thought I had a connection with, and everything is a wall of gray. Despite my best attempts, reversal of those words incanted long ago was not possible. It seems that what you embraced in those early years from synapses in your brain that cannot be removed. So, I've had to learn to live with my decision. At least the spell still works. Soon I can be back on the golf course, listening to the crack of the ball, watching those gentle clouds float through the air. The gray faces still watch from the window, their expressions grim and sour. I have had to make peace with them. This was my decision after all. I didn't intend to become a hoarder. One day I just woke up and my house was full. Junk mail, clothes, trash. They all stacked up little by little. By the time I realized I had a problem, it was already too late. I wasn't like some of these people you see on TV. I wasn't compelled to keep all these things. I was just too depressed to clean up after myself and got into it deep. I was fine with that. I had little paths through my house where I could walk without disturbing the trash. and if I just ignored it, then I could pretend it wasn't even there. But lately, something has been happening that I cannot ignore. At night, when I'm laying down in bed, I can't help but feel the dark is moving. When I'm lying down, I'll look up into the dark, and it's almost like there are small waves rippling through the room. But by the time I get up and turn on the lights, everything is normal. At first, I thought maybe there was a gas leak. Like maybe I'm huffing fumes and my vision is getting blurry. Or maybe some of the garbage in my room started rotting and releasing spores, which were making me loopy. I finally figured it out when I decided to get an app for my iPhone. I was able to hook up a system where I could turn on the light to my room without having to get up and flip the switch. So I went to bed and I waited. Sure enough, before too long, the dark was moving. I slowly pulled out my phone, brought up the app, and turned on the lights. Only something funny happened. The lights turned on, but my room was still dark. Then I saw a flutter, and I understood what I was looking at. Roaches. Millions of roaches. Enough to turn the walls and ceiling of my room black. Years of trash piling up had led to an infestation. It took them a moment, but they scattered, hiding under any piece of trash they could find. In a moment, my room looked normal, but I knew they were there. I immediately went out to the closest Walmart that was open and purchased as many bug bombs as I could. The trash was one thing, but I drew the line at bugs. In my room, I laid out some old newspaper and set down the bug bombs. I stopped when I heard a fluttering behind me. There, on the wall, the roaches had arranged themselves, spelling out the word, "Stop. What the hell?" I reached to pull the release on the bug bombs, and they shifted and now spelled, "Final warning." I pulled the release and ran to the door, but it slammed shut, being pushed by a mass of roaches. The fumes were immediately nauseating. As I choked, the roaches shifted one last time and spelled out, "Die." What does death sound like? A flatline, a dribble of blood, a scream? I've wondered if I would have the chance to scream at 70 miles per hour. I always imagined that if I died on the highway, I'd know it was coming for at least a second or two before. I'd be driving fast and the car in front of me would suddenly change lanes, and the stationary dump truck in front of it would just be there. Its taillights violet red, blustering uselessly as the physics of inertia courted the frailty of biology. What the hell? Maybe that would be it. My last word, a cliche of reaction and cognitive fumbling. Ben would die too, I assume. His car seat in the back with all its boasted safety features wouldn't restrain his internal organs as they too became a victim of inertia. His bag of gummy worms and his giraffe plushie would fly from him and into the front seat with me. They would be dressing for the tragedy when the first responders tried and failed to make the wreckage into something other than a tomb. Sophie would be gutted. People would whisper morosely about that poor woman who lost her husband and her baby boy. She'd carry the moment of our deaths for the rest of her life. More inertia. There are 16.3 miles of road between Ben's daycare and home. I drive that route twice a day, 5 days a week. And sometimes, while Ben is happily eating his snack, my anxiety chews at me. Drivers are getting worse at driving. More erratic, more hostile. Maybe that's a biased assessment, but my perception clouded by the... Maybe that's a biased assessment, my perception clouded by the film left over by another toxic day. Gigi confided in me that she's cheating on Mark. Mark is planning to take Gigi to Aruba as a surprise. Alan, my new project manager, has no clue what he's doing, and he's condescending about it. He has meetings just to hear himself talk, a waste of time. I've been submitting resumes. Soapy's been sneaking gin at night again. The car on my left is far too close to mine. I expect to see the driver texting as I glanced over, but he's not. He's looking right at me, staring. His eyes are wide, his thin lips twitching. He's not looking at the road. Then, his hands aren't on the wheel. Both reach towards me, across the passenger seat, long arms and flexing fingers. A car honks and I realize how far I've veered into my lane, a near miss. My heart thumps and I gasp and the car on the left speeds away. When I reach home, I find a sort of peace. Sophie's car is in the driveway. Ben is still in the back seat, cradling his bag of gummy worms. "We're home, buddy." Ben's eyes are open. "Ben?" But his lips are blue. "Ben!" What does death sound like? Sometimes like a thumping heart, a missed breath, and sometimes like nothing at all. In the quiet solitude of their suburban home, Kim felt an uneasy presence lurking just outside the kitchen window. She glanced. A figure standing in the street stared back, face obscured by darkness. After wiping her eyes, the figure disappeared. She confided in her husband, James, but he dismissed her concerns. "Well, have you been taking your medication?" As the days passed, she noticed James growing distant, taking on extra hours at work to support their children's private school tuition, despite him making more than enough to clear the bills. Kim's mind twisted with suspicion, leading her to believe James was seeing another woman. The emotional distance between them only deepened, and she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Seeking solace, she shared her concerns with her closest friend, who tried to soothe her fears about the figure and attributing James's behavior to work-related stress. Yes, the unsettling figure outside the window persisted, making her doubt her friend's reassurances. One afternoon, Kim and the kids returned from their daily walk, only to find James home early, an unusual surprise. He enveloped them in warm hugs and kisses, as if they had been apart for years. His newfound attentiveness startled Kim, who couldn't believe he was planning to cook dinner, a task he had never undertaken in their entire marriage. As they gathered around the dinner table, Kim watched in awe as James displayed extraordinary culinary skills. It was as if he had a hidden talent that had remained concealed until now. The family chatted joyfully about their day and the pleasant weather during the walk. Kim's heart swelled with a mix of happiness and confusion, wondering what had brought about this sudden transformation in her husband. Excitement filled the air as the kids spoke about their upcoming talent show. Kim reminded James of the event, causing him to reply with a heartfelt promise to take the day off, something he wouldn't miss for the world. The surprise made Kim audibly gasp, hardly believing the change in her husband's demeanor. Eager for some time alone with this newly attentive James, Kim initiated the children's bedtime routine earlier than usual. But just as they were about to escape their bedroom, she remembered the kids' school uniforms still in the wash. Reluctantly, she descended the creaky old wooden basement steps. As Kim moved the laundry to the dryer, a putrid stench permeated the air, filled her lungs with dread. She followed the scent, her heart pounding louder with each step. Finally, she stood before the crawl-space door and hesitated before opening it. The sight that greeted her was beyond her worst nightmares. Her husband's lifeless body, dressed in the same clothes he wore for work this morning. Kim dropped to her knees, sobbing, remembering the violent act she had done. Just as her reality started to shatter, their son called down to her asking, "What's for dinner tonight?" I have to find this serial killer. You do things that are so wrong, it sickens me to my stomach. I am going to find you. You degenerate. All those scenes you imprinted in my brain. You have been on it for 10 years now, and I still can't figure out who you are. I have been going over my case files for years. I know your every kill, and it is only a matter of time. I will find you, you flawed human being, if you are human anymore. There were mistakes, little clues to your identity. The way you tie up your victims, the way you break their fingers, and the things you do to their eyes are so wrong. Luckily for them, you do it when they are dead already. Lucky for me, you are not perfect. I will get you. My captain says I'm obsessed. I can't say she is wrong. I had other cases, but for none of them, I had this passion. Anne left me and took the kid. Said that she and Jack are not good around pictures of dead bodies. She was afraid the little guy is going to see something that will scar him for life. I don't blame her. He is only 8. I realize I am not a perfect husband, but I could have been a great dad eventually when I catch this piece of shit. But for now, I have to focus on this. Last night, there was another. Same thing as the others. Signs of struggle, blood everywhere. Same rope used. Generic stuff that can be bought in any store. Needles are different this time. Stuck in places you haven't ventured before. Bold, but stupid. Change of your ways are what will get you caught. I have seen the crime scene. I have all the pictures. And here it is. Found you. This piece of cloth is the same as the one. Oh yes, I got you. After all these years, I get face to face with you. Under my nose, you sly bitch. As I drive up to the house, I am so ready for this. The fire is in my veins. I will finally finish this search. I ring the doorbell and I hear someone coming down the stairs, dragging something heavy behind him. Dad, what are you doing here? Just visiting Mom, buddy. What you got there? It's my new friend, Bugs. Mom got it yesterday after work. Told me he will be my new friend for some time. Where's Mom, buddy? My voice almost cracked. I have to keep it cool. She's in the bedroom. She told me you would be coming tonight. His voice was trembling, like he was keeping a secret. Okay, Jack, why don't you go to the living room and play some games on PS or something? I can do that now? But it's past bedtime. He didn't even wait for me to confirm. He just ran off, dragging that heavy doll after him. I walked up the stairs, entered the second door to the left, and there she was. Looks like you found out, dear. She was sitting on the bed, gun in her hand, pointed at me. Yes, Anne, you were sloppy, and I am sorry for this. I am sorry it took me so long to figure it out. I raised my hands. But I have to say one thing. I can help you do better next time. The door in the middle of the lobby halfway was mirrored, so when I started down it, it looked like a slouchy woman in baggy pants was walking toward me. Once was within arm's length and the outside landscape bled through, so that my reflection stood up to her knees in rain-soaked concrete, each new drip rippling through her. Her head was tangled with fairy lights. I squinted through my own face to see that housekeeping neglected to bring to the patio a chair and cushions. They were swollen thick with water, absolutely ruined. There was no miscreant lurking there. There was no one at all. I ascended the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the narrow space. I had memorized the placement of black pockmarks of old gum. There's a route that allowed me to easily step on each of them. I checked my phone again, my latest video. No one had commented. The view count held steady at 26. I checked for replies from Emily Tender. None yet. We technically weren't supposed to have phones out on our rounds, and when I first started, I would twist away from the cameras to hide my illicit activities. Then I found that most nights there's no reason for anyone to ever comb back over the footage, and even if they did, it didn't matter what I did. The guy before me used to sleep through 80% of his shift, and yet they only fired him once he stopped showing up for work completely, with no warning. There was a stained glass window at the end of this hall, and the trickle of light streaming through from the parking lot floodlights created an unsettling person-shaped shadow on the carpet. Whenever I rounded this corner, I thought for a second I'd come across a resident collapsed on the floor. As I paced the hall, I noticed the shadowy twitching oddly. I shone my flashlight through it. The beam flickered and then died. The shadow stirred as if it were pushing itself into a sitting position. It turned towards me. It whispered something, or the wind blew. I hoped it was the wind. I stumbled back and fell. The shadow's faint hoarse voice wheezed. "Are you the new me?" I shook my head. It let out a long, rattling sigh. "Oh, are you my replacement? The new night guard?" "Oh," I caught my breath. Yes, that's me." "Hello." "So you're, Donnie?" I asked. "What happened to you?" "I stopped returning people's calls." He sounded wistful. "I stopped going to things. I was just too tired." "Oh," I said. I had often felt on long, lonely nights like these that I was on the verge of falling out of reality into something else. It was true, I guess. I felt its hands close around my wrist. I knew I should pull away, but I was tired too. It's a relief to know for certain now that the living world will never notice me. Knock Knock, Chapter 1. Knock, knock, knock. The same 3 knocks Carl heard every night at 3 o'clock until he moved out of his mom's house. But that was 12 years ago. Why was he hearing them again in a completely different house? Carl opened his eyes and scanned the room, only to find nothing but emptiness surrounding him. Maybe it was just a dream, he thought to himself as he rolled with his back to the room, closing his eyes. Knock, knock, knock. The same 3 aggressive knocks Carl had heard anytime he tried to ignore the first 3. But where were they coming from? Carl rolled over and scanned the room again. This time a small faint light glittered off the dark wall directly opposite his bed. "What is that?" Carl whispered to himself in a surprised, confused tone. Carl rolled his body over and swung his feet out of bed. Standing up, he took 2 steps across the small room and tried to investigate the small glittery section. As soon as Carl reached out to touch it, the shimmering spot vanished like water vapor, and Carl was left staring confused at the wall. This was new. This had never occurred when Carl was a boy. Intently, Carl began feeling along the wall for any evidence the glittery spot was there. He felt a small rough patch and pushed his thumb into it. His thumb sank in as if he were pressing into a piece of clay. The mush of the wall gave way, and he found himself quickly digging the wall away. A moment passed when Carl realized he had found a secret crawl space in his bedroom that had been walled off. Staring sharply into the narrow space, Carl noticed a small, fainter glistening light. "Hello?" Carl stuttered, receiving no reply. Hey, Carl stuttered again, this time receiving a full, vibrating buzz through the opening in the wall that caught him off guard. Carl came back to his senses in time to see the glittery light dart into the darkness out of sight. No, come back," Carl shouted in a hush. He contemplated his options. Should he call the authorities and report an orb? Should he just try and go back to sleep if this thing would let him? Should he try to follow it? After a few moments, he had made up his mind, grabbing a hold of 2 boards in the entryway of the crawl space. Carl steadied himself and took an uneasy step through the busted bedroom wall, not fully prepared for what lay ahead of him. The narrow space narrowed down after a few feet, forcing Carl to get on his hands and knees to continue. "This is foolish," he thought to himself as he began crawling on all 4s. He crawled for about 5 feet when a loud bang from behind him gave him a startle. The tight space offered no way of turning around to look, so Carl dropped his head to look between his legs. What Carl saw shook him to his core. The wall he had just stepped through was now all in one piece and repaired, effectively trapping him in the crawl space. "What do I do now?" he thought, frantically trying to figure out an escape plan as anxiety and claustrophobia began to blanket him. He reached an arm out to feel for a wall in front of him. Surely he's close to the end of the crawl space. The adjoining bathroom wasn't this far from his room. As he waved his arm blindly, he felt nothing, only the narrow walls of the crawl space and empty air. There was only one thing for him to do. Carl took a deep breath and began crawling deeper into the darkness. To be continued. We dug under a moonless sky, the only sound that of shovel and dirt. It had been a beautiful ceremony, ornate, the way one might mark the passing of a pharaoh. Her face had been restored, a work of art really, given the circumstances. Upon her body lay those items she had most treasured. I knew nothing of jewelry, of purity or clarity, but I knew when something was expensive, and they were really freaking expensive. I'm not proud of what I do, but there are worse ways to make a living. Better to defile than the dead. At least that's what I think. So we continued to dig, sweat dripping down our necks as a cold wind blew. Finally, we made it. A dull thud of cheap steel on antique oak. Shovels scraped across the surface, leaving marks like fingernails in the finish. Then, with a hammer and chisel, we set to work on the latch until the wood cracked. I held the torch as he opened the lid, hands working quickly to remove what we came for, the light highlighting her delicate features, casting an aura around her peaceful features. Standing there in the darkness, I had never seen such beauty, such that it brought a sense of calm over me. I wondered what it would have been like in another life to have met her, to have been married into opulence and wealth, to wake up next to wanting for nothing but to see her sleep. She opened her eyes. He jumped back, knocking me into the grave wall, winding me as he screamed, clawing at the dirt, feet scraping across my flesh as he clambered out onto the well-manicured lawn and fled, his cries echoing throughout the night. She stared at me, eyes adjusting to the light, taking in reality of her surroundings. For a moment, I thought of her as my sleeping beauty, rescued by a charming prince in overalls, a real fairy tale moment. Then, reality struck, and before my eyes, my fantasy turned to dust. I dove forward and slammed the coffin lid closed, holding it tight as she pounded and screamed against the elegant silk lining, her half-like arms no match for my body weight. I reached up and pulled down armfuls of dirt, chunks of soil disappearing, tumbling down my overalls as I did so, burying the both of us until I was sure the weight would be too much for her, and climbed out. I grabbed the shovel and worked double time, throwing the dirt into the hole as her kicks and screams became fainter and fainter, until, under the ground, she was silent. As I made my way towards the cemetery gates, I noticed something glinting on path. I bent down and picked up a gold necklace, the giant gem reflecting even in the darkness. As I knelt there, I swore I heard screams from the newly filled grave, but that was impossible, because the dead cannot talk. I didn't grow up in a small town, but I've always been intrigued. I remember singing along to John Mellencamp as a kid, wondering what it would be like to know all of your neighbors. I'd love to tell you that's why I settled down in Morrisville. When I first moved here, Morrisville had 400 people and a stoplight connecting the town to the county road that connected the state road to the interstate. No one passed through Morrisville, and that was the point. A man could rest his bones here and enjoy the simpler pleasures, hiking, fishing, the great outdoors. It was all right there. It was also a town that embraced solitude, and that was just fine with me. I had no real plan when I first rolled in. Thankfully, the town had one for me. The local watering hole needed a partner to finance the repair of a leaky roof, among other things. And that was just the kind of investment I was looking for. I was 35 and for the first time had a clear vision of what a future could look like. Then a funny thing happened. Somewhere along the line, someone figured out that the eastern part of town was on top of a whole bunch of natural gas. Scientists and speculators, workers, they all poured into town. It should have been a dream for a one-trout town. It only took a month before I got the look I feared. It was one of recognition and resolve. He was about 40 and in a sharp suit. He looked tired and tattered, kind of like a CEO after he works a day on the lines to be one of the guys. When he left $100 to pay for his beer, I knew there was a problem. I told the other bartender I was tired and headed out to follow him. He headed towards the only motel in town. I tried to follow him, but he heard me almost instantly. I came here for the gas rights, but here's the real prize. The man smiled as he lit a cigarette. I knew there was no use pleading. Not where I came from. I only hope it would be quick. I saw the man reach in his coat and knew what I was in for. Of course, a funny thing happened. As the man prepared to act, a single shot rang out. The smiling man wasn't anymore. "Pete, are you okay? Was he robbing you?" "He was the sheriff, and thank you for intervening. He told me he was going to kill me," I replied as I finally found myself breathing again. The phone that Smiley reached for was awfully close to the handgun in his belt. Small-town justice had saved me. For now, I knew this was just the beginning. There are sins you can outrun and sins you can't. Hell, even the feds stop eventually. This was different. If a legit money man knew my face, I knew Morrisville was dead to me. I had taken a lot of their product and a lot of their cash. It's been 8 hours since I hit the road. I'm still in search of the small town I can breathe in. I'm just not sure it exists. This was a good lie. I mean that by two separate definitions of the word. A moral deception and a competent one. Altruistic and thoroughly well executed. Still, it does leave a bad taste in my mouth. He even told her about the box wine. My mother sits across from me, 20 pounds lighter than she was last year, face gaunt, hair unwashed, yet she speaks with unbridled joy, a long-absent spark rekindled in her eyes. Box wine was an in-joke between her and my father. They competed to find the tackiest label, serving it at special occasions. They drank Chateau Vin Rouge on their 10th anniversary. A similar box rests on the table between us, 4 glasses lighter than it was an hour ago. Maybe that's what the bad taste is. She knew how he took dance classes to impress me in university, and My father took his own life last year. He struggled against dark, intrusive thoughts all of his life, and one day he lost. My mother crumbled like a cliff falling into the ocean, no longer caring for herself, barely eating. What's worse, raised Catholic, my mother panicked over the circumstances of my father's death, that his cardinal sin might lead him to vastly different afterlives. Safe to say, in losing my father, I all but lost my mother too. I just wanted her to be happy again. Yesterday, my mother visited a spirit medium. She'd climbed the steps above the failing tattoo parlor, seeking closure that friends, family, and priests couldn't provide in the hands of her town's only occultist. It sounds like she found it. And after everything, after saying things he never told anyone but me, she said. My mother's eyes glisten rapturously. He said that it doesn't matter how you die. Everyone goes to the same place. Paradise. We'll be together again forever. I watch her and I smile, finally resolved on one fact. This was a good lie. Seeking out the medium days before my mother's appointment, providing her with details about my father's life that no one else could know, paying her handsomely to convince my mother of my father's presence, and of the bright afterlife they would ultimately share. I was conflicted at first, but as my mother smiles before me, it all seems worth it. Yet, still the bad taste grows. A strange bitterness spreads across my tongue, lethargy creeping across my limbs. My head grows heavy, falling from my mother's smile face to the box of half-finished wine I never saw her open. "I'm sorry, sweetie, I shouldn't trick you, but it's all true. We all go to eternal paradise with the people we love. It doesn't matter how. It doesn't matter when. Why would we possibly wait? I hear my mother finishing her glass. I feel my breath heaving, darkness rolling in at the edges of my vision. This was a good lie that's undeniable. Better than I thought. I was supposed to take care of Alex. I only turned my back for a minute, and I've lived to regret it ever since. Alex and I were close, especially when we were little. We were 4 years apart, so I was big enough to give her piggyback rides. She'd love that. And pick her right up off the ground. She hated that. She was my confidant, and I was her partner in crime. We drove each other crazy, but at the end of the day, we'd be friends again. Suddenly, she's back at home where she belongs. I will never forgive myself for ignoring her that day. She had just turned 15, and I was living at home, taking a gap year before I headed off to college. I was on my phone reading through application requirements for yet another school when she started asking about something. The thing I feel worse about is that I didn't even pay enough attention to hear what she wanted. When I see her again, I'm going to hang on to every word she says. "Go get yourself some candy or something from the vending machine," I said without looking. "Mom and Dad gave you some pocket money, right?" Why did I let her go by herself? I've tried to make excuses for myself, telling myself that Alex was always too stubborn, and that she would have gone anyway if I said no. But I gave her the idea, and that's bad enough. I was glued to my stupid phone until I heard her scream. Our family hasn't been the same since. It wasn't Alex's fault. She couldn't have known. It was mine. I was supposed to take care of her. That's what big brothers do. The authorities couldn't do anything, but I've done my own investigation. It's been months, but I finally figured out how to bring her home. I can't wait to see our parents' face when Alex and I walk through the front door, safe and sound. Tonight I gather up the supplies I'll need. It wasn't easy, and I'd be lying if I said what I've done was entirely legal. But I have to do this for Alex. If all goes well, she'll be home by tomorrow morning. The drive was long, but I could barely contain my excitement. "Just a little longer, sis," I whispered. "You're going home." I know she couldn't hear me, but she will soon. Tonight I can finally redeem myself. After so long, I finally have Alex here with me again. She's in terrible condition, but now she can finally heal. I help her into the chair, giving her head a gentle squeeze before I go back to the car for my other passenger. He's not lucid enough to run. I've memorized the ritual by heart. One soul for another. By tomorrow night, Alex will be home where she belongs instead of spending another night in that coffin. I jolted awake just as I felt like a hand was going to grab me. I sighed when I realized it was only a part of my dreams. I went down to the living room and brewed a cup of coffee and flipped on the TV. I wasn't really paying attention to whatever insomniac weird cartoon was playing, but I did keep sneaking glances at the book on the table. Had we really made the right choice by opening the book? I debated this question as I slowly sipped the hot beverage. I noticed, suddenly, that my body was shaking, and something told me it wasn't from the caffeine. I had the sudden urge to run back to my room and hide. even though it wouldn't have done much good. A hypnotic ringing soon began in my ears. It horrified me, but at the time made me feel the strangest peace. Maybe things would be better if I found the source. I followed the ringing, which went right out to my doorstep, and walked out into the crisp fall evening. Birds chirped on trees, and the same few hills that dotted the countryside around my house were unchanged. Suddenly, I saw a bright flash of light in the sky. As my eyes adjusted, the white light morphed into a sideways crescent. Two small purple lights appeared above it, creating a face. A human-like outline quickly appeared as well, with a body that was made up of stars and planets. Utter terror filled my mind. Shocks flew through my body, paralyzing me. What was I supposed to do standing in front of a creature of this scale? I practically shrieked as the being quickly pointed its head and arm at me. It grinned wider, and it leaned forward towards me, blocking out any light in my vision. It got closer to me at an alarming rate, and I tried to find my door but couldn't find it in the darkness. I squeezed my eyes, longing to get anywhere but here. But it was too late. When I opened my eyes, I was staring face to face with something that had universes for eyes and entire worlds. It laughed at me like it knew how much fear I felt, but there was nothing I could do. "Thank you for releasing me. Soon everyone will see me too," it said. It moved a slender finger to its mouth, like it had just told me a secret, and quickly snapped back up into the sky. As my vision adjusted, I could see it disappearing beyond my horizon. I will never forget those awful laughs as it mocked me and left me to only paranoia and fear. That will be the last time I get coffee at 4:30 in the morning. I'm 36 years old. Pretty young to have my ma pass, but here we are. The funeral was on July 10th. All the food people brought over is gone. The downstairs has all been packed up and loaded into a U-Haul. So I'm up in the attic. Most of the stuff up here is just garbage. Not even worth putting into a yard sale. I found our old games. They were all piled in a single box, and under the box I found a case for a game I had never seen before. A Ouija board. It was a gorgeous wooden case with an ebony stain and ornately carved depictions that made me think of the gates of hell. It was weird and creepy, but I loved it. But why hadn't I seen this before? My mom and I shared a common inclination towards the strange and macabre. Our favorite movie nights were always with scary movies. So why would she not have shown me something so beautiful? I set it to the side, and when the day was done, I placed the Ouija board under my arm as I made my way down the stairs. Around 9:30 in the evening, after I ate the burger and fries that got dropped off by the delivery guy, I set the case on the table. I lifted off the lid to find the bottom of the case was actually the Ouija board itself. The planchette was within the board, and the access to it was a bit unusual. I noticed the board had a pentagram pointing straight up that was ever so slightly separated from the rest of the board. I put my fingers on it and tried twisting it around. To my surprise, it was able to move counterclockwise with a slight click sound every time it moved a couple centimeters. When the star appeared to be pointing straight down, there was a louder click and the planchette slid out from the side. The planchette was just as remarkable as the board. It was also stained in a dark ebony, and it was carved to resemble the devil's face. The wider end of the planchette was the top of the devil's head, where a couple small horns protruded, and the narrow end was his chin and goatee. He was screaming angrily, and his mouth made a large opening, which is where the operator of the board could read letters and numbers. I moved it so that the hole in the planchette was over the word yes, and began cleaning up for the night. When I came back to the table, the planchette was over the word no. What the hell? Magnets? There were shortcut words for hello and goodbye? So I placed the planchette over the word hello. After a few seconds, it spun approximately 45 degrees, again clockwise on its own. My heart was racing. "Ma?" I said aloud. The planchette moved on its own to the word yes. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these short, scary stories. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. Until next time, please take care of yourself. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night.